Let's start with unit number 2 in Foundation Course 3, and the name of the unit is Dealing with Environmental Concerns. Next topic is Dealing with Disasters. Now students, disasters, whether they are natural or man-made, they can affect millions and millions of people, and it also causes millions of economic losses, leaving behind many painful memories. They sometimes they can affect for weeks or months or sometimes even years. Therefore, disaster management is very much necessary. So this process of disaster management involves 5 phases. These are: one is prevention, second is mitigation, third is preparedness, fourth is response, and fifth is recovery. Let's now understand each of these 5 phases in much detail. So students, the first phase in dealing with disaster is prevention. We have always heard the famous quote, prevention is better than cure. Yes, it is very much applicable in the real life. So what is prevention? Prevention involves all those activities that are required to prevent the disaster or prevent the gravity of loss if the disaster occurs. Prevent the gravity of loss means to reduce the negative effect of disaster, the proportion of the negative effect of disaster. Gravity means the force, okay, the force with which the disaster can destroy lives, can destroy property, so that at least we can reduce. Though we very well are aware that disaster we cannot avoid, it will happen, but at the most what we can do from our end is to reduce those negative effects. How? By using certain preventive measures. So in this prevention phase, in we require is certain active participation of all groups of society. So which are those groups? Government, NGOs, and many other institutions and organizations which come forward so as to prevent the negative effect of disasters. Now let's understand further. Next, further, under prevention phase, we have Disaster Management Action Plan, that is DMAP. So this DMAP focuses, what is its role? Its role is that it focuses on various governmental departments so that they participate in disaster management. So it motivates various governmental departments to use certain preventive measures to reduce the negative effect of disasters. So what is the purpose of disaster management action plan? The main purposes are: one is to assess. Assess means what? Assess means to evaluate or to estimate, that is to find out what is the current status of existing resources and facilities available with various governmental departments. That is, what are the facilities which the government departments is providing, okay, currently to all the survivors or all the people who have been affected due to disaster, so that they keep a check on. Second is to assess, that is to keep a check and to find out what are the adequacies dealing with disaster. Adequacies means whether, suppose if for example if the government is telling that we have a so and so machine or so and so system to deal with disaster, so this plan, disaster management action plan, checks whether if the government is saying is true or not, whether the system is in place or not, whether it is effective or not, because this has to be checked before and not after the disaster takes place, right? Because we are studying which phase? Prevention phase. Further, it also identifies whether there is any further requirement for better technological support, better data management techniques, and so on, which will and other techniques which will help to prevent the disaster. And lastly, it motivates, it makes certain plans and it motivates the state disaster management action plan to be effective, okay, to plan well and so that it becomes an effective response tool. Next, further, under prevention phase, after disaster management action plan, we have is disaster warning. Now, the disaster management authorities need to plan for early warning so as to reduce the impact of disaster. So, let's see what are the important elements of warning signals in our next slide. So, let us now see which are the important elements of warning. First one is communities in disaster prone areas are made aware of the warning signals. How this will take place either through the local newspapers or through local news channels. Students who are going to schools, there the school authorities or the teachers will convey to the students about the disaster which is near. So all these channels are used so as to make people aware. Second is alternate warning systems must be kept in readiness in case of technical failures such as power failure. For example, alternate warning system can be radio. Okay, radio is one good option. Third is all available warning systems should be used. That is, for example, in whatever situation it is during the disaster, if there is more than one warning facility available, then government must use all the facilities as much as possible to make the people aware. Next is the warnings should, to the extent possible, be clear about the severity, that is the extent, the duration, how long, and the areas that may be affected. So very well government should make people and the communities aware to what extent will there will be people will get affected, for how long is expected that the effect of the disaster can continue, and which are the disaster prone areas which where people will get the most affected. All these certain information government should convey to the people so that at least in those areas people will be at most taken care of. Next, warning should be conveyed in a simple, direct and non-technical language to incorporate day-to-day usage patterns. That is, it is important that whenever warnings are given, it should be given in simple language. Directly, that is not using through various sources, but directly to the people, and using non-technical language. That is, when people from the disaster management team, if they use their technical language, we common people will not be able to understand those certain terms, right? So it is important so that the people understand, so they communicate in simple language so that even those people who are not literate, they are able to understand the basic information. Next, the do's and don'ts should be clearly communicated to the community to ensure appropriate responses. Okay, so that people are very much clearly aware, they know beforehand what they have to do and what not. Next, warning statements should not evoke curiosity or panic behavior. This should be in a professional language to devoid of any emotions. So that is, this means that whenever warning signals or warning statements are made, okay, it should be just simply a statement. Okay, it should not create any panic among people. For example, suppose if you see a headline, beware Mumbai floods, beware tomorrow we are having Mumbai floods, Mumbai will be drowned in water. Imagine such statements if any news channel tells us, or if it if you read anytime in the newspaper such statements, obviously the person reading or viewing the news will get scared, right? We will get panicked. That is, so this all statements are to be avoided. Next is spread of rumors should be controlled. This is very important. Now, if you remember during this COVID situation in the start, okay, this was very much in the start, government had strictly, told the WhatsApp group admins that if they come to know, if they are aware that if any false news about coronavirus is being circulated, those admins will be, they will be taken by the police. Okay, they will be arrested. So okay, why? Because these are certain rumors. If you spread these rumors, people get panicked. So this is one example. Next is, all relevant agencies and organizations should be alerted. Further, wherever possible, assistance of community leaders and organized groups should be sought in explaining the threat. So this is, for example, NGOs or certain organizations. They should come forward, okay, and they should also be given certain information so that they are better means to communicate and make people aware. Once a warning is issued, it should be followed up by subsequent warnings in order to keep people informed of the latest situation. For example, imagine if government only tells us that our country is facing a new kind of virus called as coronavirus. Imagine if we got only this information. If obviously every one of us would like to have certain information. What is this coronavirus? Okay, when did it start, when will it get over, what are we people supposed to do, right? All this information also we must get, right? So government has provided us this information, correct? So all this is important. So just not saying that we are having this kind of disaster in our country, but also telling us what is to be done, when will it get over. All this is also important. And last, in the event of a disaster threat receding, all clear signals should be given. Next, further, under prevention, after disaster warning, we have education and training. So students, there is a need to educate the various sections of the society on disaster management. So involving of educational and training institutions, corporate sectors, NGOs, etc. will generate knowledge on disaster management by conducting various training and awareness programs. Like for example, students, I will take an example of COVID situation. When it started, various education institutions, even involving our college, if you remember, we started, giving certain quiz. We had provided one quiz where students were filling those quiz so that they are aware what are the preventive measures, what are the early warning signs of COVID. Another example is where our education institution, our college had also prepared various videos. If you must have seen the NSS videos and all, their students are providing, various signs and various preventive measures. So all these are information is provided through an education institute so as to make people as well as their students aware. Next phase under process of disaster management is mitigation. Mitigation means to minimize the effect of disaster. Mitigation also means to prevent hazards from developing into disasters altogether, or to reduce the effects of disaster when they occur. That is, we always say, na students, that it is better to have a smaller problem than a bigger one. So this is the same way. Mitigation also aims to reduce loss of life and property. How? That is by reducing the impact of disaster. Mitigation also aims for long-term measures. That means it does not aim for a temporary shortcuts. It always aims to have long-term measures so as to reduce the risk of disaster. Lastly, mitigation involves risk analysis. Risk analysis means identifying and then analyzing what is the expected issue that could have a negative impact. Like for example, insurance. Insurance is given to people. Why? So as to protect the financial losses, right, that could have happened. So insurance gives a protection. Further, in the phase of mitigation, it also involves structural and non-structural measures. Structural measures involves changes in structure of building. Now, for example, this is in case of earthquakes. So, in earthquakes, there are certain positions which a building can be constructed, so as to avoid the collapsing during an earthquake. Secondly, mitigation also involves non-structural measures. Non-structural measures involves is following all the rules and regulations which are given by the government, following all the evacuation techniques, building our houses at safer places. So all these are measures which are taken to avoid the negative impacts. Further, under mitigation, we have relief and rehabilitation measures. These measures are undertaken by government and NGOs. Let's see what it includes. First is immediate relief measures. That means setting up relief camps. This is when after the disaster, government can set up relief camps for major disasters that take place. Government can also provide payments like financial, certain amount of money can be fixed for those families where people have lost their lives, or those families where people are missing. So in that case, government can provide certain uh, payments. Next is intermediate shelter. That is, temporary shelter can be provided because people have lost their homes, right? So temporary shelter can be provided, which can go on till certain months. Then compensation can also be provided for the crop loss. Correct? Farmers have lost their crops, so government can compensate for that loss. Livestock loss, that is animals, those who have lost their animals during the flood, or during any disaster, right? So government can provide that kind of compensation as well. Further, safe drinking water facilities. As I told you, after the disaster, waterborne diseases take place. So it is important that the government provides safe drinking facilities so that further spread of diseases can be contained. Next is social services. Social services include health health centers which are set up for providing medical care and treatment, free medicines, and so on. Like for example, if you observe, like for example, students, in today's COVID situation, our government is promoting universal COVID testing, especially in those COVID prone areas, okay, where there is more population. So this is so that it doesn't become a bigger problem, right? The number of cases must reduce. It should not increase more. So this is one way to provide social service. Further, long-term measures include reconstruction for community infrastructure. That is, whatever property is damaged due to the disaster, so government can undertake reconstruction of those damaged property, that is building the new ones, upgrading the local transport facilities that were affected, restoring the livelihood, that is those people who have lost their jobs due to the disaster. So government can provide compensation to the business people, that is self-employed people, the skilled people, that is the artisans, etc. And also in case of floods, government can upgrade the drainage system. So all these are measures that will help to reduce the negative impact of disaster. Next, third phase in dealing with disaster, that is in the process of disaster management, is disaster preparedness. Disaster preparedness means planning how to respond to the disaster. Now, usually whenever the disaster occurs, people get panicked, people get frightened. So usually they do certain things which are not expected to do, in which they can cause harm to themselves as well as their family members and the people around them. So it is important that we act very mindfully and alertly when the disaster happens, right? So disaster preparedness also means to achieve a satisfactory level of readiness or preparedness to respond and act during any emergency situation. So usually what happens, anything happens, okay, anything disaster, or we hear a loud sound, anything, people just start running, without even thinking that is there a need to run, or else we need to stop and wait at some point. So it is very important to think, what are we doing, whether our actions are helping us or it is affecting us. So under this there are certain activities. Okay, so there are certain activities. Let us see which are those activities. One is communication plans, that is planning proper communication, providing warnings, giving all the clear instructions. It is very important. Next is training. I'll give you one example, students. When I was doing my B.Ed course, that is, if you, those people who are not aware, B.Ed course is Bachelor in Education, that is the teacher training course. So in that I had also done a particular training where we all prospective teachers were given a training to handle fire extinguisher. So why it was given? There was a purpose. That is because when we teach in schools and colleges, if suddenly there is a fire, so obviously our students don't know how to operate that. So whose responsibility it is? It is the responsibility of the present teacher there, right? Because we really don't know who will come there first to help, but obviously the teacher is always in the class. So that is the reason we all teachers was given training to how to use fire extinguisher. So this is one kind of awareness to reduce the negative impact. Third is casual prediction. Now, this is another important aspect of preparedness is casualty prediction. That means to study how many deaths or people are expected to get injured from any kind of disaster. Now, this is important. Why? Because it will give planners, that is people who are planning the strategies, that what exact resources they can use so as to reduce the negative impact. Next is stockpiling. Stockpiling means what? If whenever the disaster occurs, so it is important that for certain amount of days we have essential food, medicines, or any other things which are very very basic and without which no human being can live. All those things are required to be kept with us in our homes. Like for example, I remember when in our country when there was outbreak of COVID, and when government had declared that within uh, 2 days there will be complete lockdown. I remember there was a rush. There was total rush among people to go to the grocery stores and buy all the necessary essentials, all the ration that we call, right? So people were just running and taking, stockpiling. What were they doing? They were stockpiling. So by stockpiling means what? To keep all the essentials in case of emergency. But this does not mean that you will stockpile for another 3 to 4 months. Okay, for at least for some time. And last is evacuation plan. Evacuation plan means that there should be proper planning on how to go about if the disaster take place. So government should have a certain plan in their mind. Now we cannot keep only one evacuation plan, okay, for all the type of disasters. No, that cannot take place. So what should be the ideal one? There should be different types of disaster evacuation plan for different types of disasters. So, and also the government should be made aware of that which plan should be followed in which type of disaster, so as to avoid any kind of confusion and panic. Next, further under process of disaster management is response phase. Response phase means to provide immediate help for the survival of victims of disaster, to provide them with medical help and to provide them with psychological help. Now in response, we have three phases. One is pre-disaster response phase, second is response phase, and third is post-response phase. In pre-disaster response phase, we have reducing the impact of disaster on life and property by setting up control rooms, evacuation of people, and much more. In response phase, we have ensuring steps to be taken so as to reduce the loss of life and property. And last, in post-response phase, there is achievement of rapid and effective recovery from disaster. So if the disaster occurs, people should get immediate recovery so that they are back to their normal life once again. The last phase under process of disaster management is the recovery phase. Recovery phase means returning the community back to normal. It also means restoring affected area to its previous state, that is the state which it was before the disaster took place. So there are certain activities under this phase. One is short-term recovery activities and second is long-term recovery activities. Under short-term recovery activities, we have certain activities which aim to return life supporting systems. That is those activities without which the normal human life cannot function, which means food, shelter, clothing, medicines, water, all this. And another is long-term recovery activities, that is providing financial assistance, providing counseling sessions. All this is long-term activities. Next topic is general issues related to compensation, equitable and fair distribution of relief. There are certain observations with respect to human rights issues regarding the compensation which government provides to the survivors after the disaster is over. So let's see the reasons. First one is recognition and quantification of loss. After the disaster, it is very important that the government officials recognize the loss and quickly quantify it. This means that it is important that they should feel that yes, the society has suffered from loss. The survivors have lost their property, their valuables. And apart from this, they should quickly quantify it. That means they should know that how far the loss has happened, how much the loss has happened. Why? Because this will help the government to decide the quantum of compensation. This means what? How much quantity of compensation the government has to provide to the survivors. But in reality, this does not happen. Apart from this, the whoever are the victims of disasters, they are not taken into confidence. That means their views, their beliefs, all these are not considered at all. In fact, if we ask them, they are the best people to tell how much they are suffering and what is that they really require. Second is discrepancies in response to disasters. Now, although we have national disaster management policy, but the policy does not have a common approach which is adopted across our country in responding to the disasters. So because of this, what happens is all different areas are given different kind of treatment. Okay, so there is unequal treatment. Even with respect to compensation, some better off areas the victims are given better compensation, while in the interior parts of the countries, maybe the victims are not given that amount of compensation which is really required. Next is slow and inadequate response. Now, students, whenever the disaster takes place, it is very important that our government officials as well as the National Disaster Management Team is able to respond to the disaster affected areas and the victims very, very quickly, and effective response is required. But however, in reality, it is observed that government's response is generally delayed and it is not appropriate. It is not up to the mark. Why? That is because they are having their own rigid rules. They are having their own lengthy procedures. There is lack of coordination between them. There is lack of decision-making authority, right? Everyone says that we are unable to take decision. It is from the higher authority. So they are just passing on. As well as often this affects the government's response adversely to the disaster survived people. Next point is with respect to compensation. Now we very well know that whenever there is disaster, it causes huge and irreparable loss to our property as well as the human lives. So although the government says that it will provide compensation to the victims, but in reality it is always inadequate. It always falls short. So moreover, in many cases, it is observed that those victims do not even get the compensation. I'll give you one example. For example, the victims of Bhopal gas leak, which happened in the year 1984, they have not yet received full compensation. So this was their response. Next point is insensitivities. This means that it is also observed that many government officials treat the disaster victims in a very insensitive manner. They are not ready to look at how the victims are affected, how psychologically they are affected, because there are certain wounds, students, which do not heal very fast. Though the physical injuries might heal after few months or few years, but there are certain memories, okay, because the victims have lost their family members, that do not heal, right? So these all feelings, these all issues are, left unobserved by the government officials. So it seems that they are very insensitive towards those survivors. Next reason is involuntary displacement. Several times after the disaster, the victims have to leave their place of residence and occupation because everything is totally destroyed. Their property, their houses where they live, everything is destroyed. Even the occupation, wherever, suppose if they were working in the nearby industry, that is also destroyed. Their agricultural field, if they were working, that is also destroyed. So because of this, what happens, they face severe economic loss, and they have to leave that place. They have to be displaced, they have to move to some other nearby place. So I would give you one example for this. Now when there was a tsunami in the year 2004, there were several families who were residing near the seashore in Chennai. They had to be forcefully relocated after the tsunami. So this is one example of displacement. Next reason is unequal insensitive rehabilitation policy. Now it is observed that the rehabilitation process of the disaster victims is not very good in India. So it is always observed that this rehabilitation process is not very organized, and it is a very chaotic. It takes place in a very chaotic manner. No victims are clear that what they are going to receive or what are they expected to do, and so on. And many a times the rehabilitation does not even take place. The compensation is not even given. So all these things are observed. Next reason is no participation of victims. Now it is always seen that after the disaster, government do not consider the views of the survivors. Okay, their views are not taken into consideration while taking any decision. Now apart from this, they are so affected that they are not even aware, and they do not even know that how far the loss has happened because of that particular disaster, how many people have died, how big the loss is, because they are totally affected. They are unaware about all these things. Government do not provide them with such information. And last point is about lack of coordination. Now it is always observed, okay, in any disaster, in many government departments, there is always lack of coordination. Every department doesn't know what is happening. Okay, they only know at the most about their department. They do not know how it is to be related, because it is a procedure, right? So when it comes to providing relief and rehabilitation, government departments are unaware about what is the procedure, how to go about. And because of this, what happens, who is suffering? The victims. They are already suffering because of the huge losses, and apart from this, even this process of compensation and providing relief is also not in place. So they are just affected totally. Next topic is National Disaster Management Act, that is NDMA 2005. Now NDMA has defined disaster as a catastrophe, mishap, calamity or grave occurrence in any area arising from natural or man-made causes or by accident or negligence, which results in substantial loss of life, human suffering and damage to property and environment. Now let us understand further. NDMA 2005 defines disaster management as a continuous cycle and integrated process. Integrated process means the process which is interlinked and which is coordinated. Okay, it's a coordinated and is an interlinked process of what, consisting of what, that is planning, organizing, coordinating and implementing various policies, various measures which are necessary for what? One is prevention of danger, that is any threat from any kind of disaster. Second is mitigation of risk, that is to reduce the risk of any disaster as well as to reduce its negative effects. Third is capacity building. Fourth is preparedness. Preparedness for what? To deal with the disaster. Fifth is prompt response. Prompt response means quick response from any kind of disaster. Next, sixth is assessing the effects of disaster. Assessing means to evaluate how much the effects of disaster would be on the people and the areas around. Seventh is evacuation, relief and rescue measures that has to be undertaken. And last is rehabilitation and reconstruction of the property that is lost. Further, NDMA is organized into the following departments. First is policy and planning. Second is mitigation. Third is operations and communication. Fourth is administration. And fifth is capacity building. Further, NDMA is also involved in equipment and training. That is, it provides training as well as how to handle certain equipments, for example, fire extinguisher. And there are different equipments to whom, to the government officials, various organizations, various institutes, various corporate companies, various community organizations, so that they are able to respond during the disaster or just after the disaster takes place. Further, NDMA is monitoring and as well as developing guidelines for the local firefighting services across our country. It is also involved in collaborating with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in developing emergency health and ambulance services during as well as after the disaster takes place. Now, as we know, students, NDMA is the apex body. Apex body means it is the topmost body, which has the responsibility of laying down the policies, plans, as well as the guidelines for disaster management. Why? So as to ensure there is timely and effective response to the disasters. So let's see in detail what are its various functions and what are its responsibilities. First is lay down policies. On what? On disaster management. Second is approve the national plan of disaster management. Third is approve plan which is prepared by the various ministries or governmental departments in accordance with the national plan. That is, it should be in line with what the national disaster management plan is. Fourth is laying down guidelines to be followed by the state authorities regarding disaster management. Next point is to lay down guidelines which will be followed by the various ministries or departments of Government of India. Why? For the purpose of preventing any disaster or reducing the effects of the disaster, that is mitigation of its effects. Next point under NDMA's responsibilities and functions is implementation of the policy and plans for disaster management. Next is provision of funds for the purpose of mitigation. That is, obviously, if the government is providing compensation, providing relief, then it will also require certain funds. So all that also has to be planned well. Next point is to provide support to other countries which are affected by major disasters by the support of central government, because there are disasters which other countries are also affected. So it is our duty, the duty of the neighboring country, so as to maintain friendly relations with the different countries. So it is our duty to help them also during the disaster. Same goes to them, they will also help us if we face any disaster. This shows the friendly relations between two countries. Next point is to take other measures such as prevention of disasters, mitigation, preparedness, as well as capacity building for dealing with the disaster. And last is to lay down broad policies and guidelines for the functioning of National Institute of Disaster Management. Further, it is mandatory, that is, it is compulsory for all the state government to establish a state disaster management authority, that is SDMA, which works on the guidelines provided by the NDMA. Further, next point is the Prime Minister of India is considered as the chairman of NDMA. And lastly, there is also National Disaster Response Force, that is NDRF, which also functions under NDMA.